as long as Paul Ryan is referenced positively by Mika Brzezinski, all is well in the world. And I know Paul Ryan gets up and it's always Jack Kemp, Jack Kemp, Jack Kemp. Well, God bless the memory of Jack Kemp. How many people think Jack Kemp could beat Hillary Clinton today? Raise your hand. Most people don't even know who Jack Kemp is. You're young. Like, who's Kemp? What are you talking about? Paul Ryan's like, on Jack Kemp, Jack Kemp, Jack Kemp. And he's trying to meld Kemp into Reagan. Kemp isn't Reagan. Kemp is very different from Reagan. We're going to talk later on to Craig Shirley. He'll remind us just how different Jack Kemp was from Reagan. But the dissolving of Kemp into Reagan is also another one of these false narratives.
I first met Jack Kemp exactly where you would expect, at Tortilla Coast. The thing about Jack was that he was an optimist all the way. He refused to accept that any part of America or the American idea could ever be written off. Here was a conservative willing, here was a conservative eager to go to America's bleakest communities and talk about how free enterprise would lift people out of poverty.
It's like we're in some kind of 1980s time warp. How many times did Jack Kemp run for president and lose? I mean, I'm sorry, but these are the kinds of ideas you sit around and discuss at like a Thursday night seminar at UCLA, or more so than jawboning about, curing poverty. I just want to have government, number one, get out of the way, and number two, not demonize the working people of the country. And business creates opportunities, but not if the government is going to flood the country with millions and millions of foreign workers and immigrants who will undercut the poor that are in the neighborhoods right now. So this is all enterprise zones and all. That's fine, but enterprise zones plus globalization of the variety we've seen over the past 20 years, you can do all the enterprise zones you want. But if you're going to flood the country with indigent workers, all those poor people are going to be undercut anyway. That's Paul Ryan yesterday on waxing nostalgic about Tortilla Coast. I used to live above Tortilla Coast. It's an old dive that used to be on Capitol Hill. Continuing with Craig Shirley, the author of Last Act and, of course, Reagan biographer. And Craig, why don't you set us straight on the Jack Kemp philosophy versus the Reagan philosophy? Obviously, Kemp, the Kemp-Roth tax cuts, everybody remembers those. And my staff doesn't because they're all in their 20s. But for old people like you and I mean, we remember those. It was phenomenal. Yeah, it was phenomenal. But Ryan seems to meld Reagan with Kemp. But how are the two different? How are the philosophies different?
They were completely different. Jackie, I mean, look, God rest his soul, Jack Kemp was a great man and brought fire to mankind with the tax cuts, although Robert Mundell and Jude Wanniski and others were also advancing tax cuts, and they actually got the idea from John Kennedy, who coined the phrase "a rising tide lifts all boats." Kemp later used it himself, but it was Kennedy who first said that. Jack was kind of derived at the time, as you recall, as kind of a Jackie one note because it was just about economics. He didn't care or think much about foreign policy or SDI or things like that, and. So, he was a media favorite, the former quarterback and all that other stuff. But Reagan didn't think well enough of Jack to put him on the ticket in 1980 when a lot of conservatives thought Jack should be on the ticket with Reagan. He was seen by a lot of Reagan aides as uncontrollable. And so they picked George Bush. I mean, you can argue about George Bush, but Jack Kemp wasn't picked for a lot of good reasons.
So Kemp had more of the big government view of beneficence. The government can be a beneficent force.
Yeah, he never worried about shrinking the size of government. He was all about economics, about tax cuts. Although, as I said before, is that he gets a little bit too much credit. There were other people involved in instructing Reagan's thinking on tax cuts. But that was basically it. He didn't, truth be told, Gingrich did a lot more as far as carrying Reagan's water in the House in the 1980s than Jack did.
And then we've had others, and again, people don't know who most of these people are, but others who write for the New York Times and so forth, who are, worked in the Reagan administration and the Bush administration,
right.
who say that Trump is destroying the Reagan legacy, or Trump is destroying the Republican Party, or it's over because of Trump. Well, if the party is over, how is it over because of a guy who's never been in politics?
Well, I would submit that the Bush legacy almost destroyed the Reagan legacy more than Trump has. Trump hasn't even been nominated, so I don't think we should charge him and find him guilty until he's actually committed a crime.
Or actually governed. How about governed?
Actually exactly. But the whole phrase "big government republicanism" came out of the George W. Bush administration, and wild foreign policy, internationalist foreign policy ventures, Wilsonian foreign policy, the growth of government, the growth of new bureaucracies, the bailout of Wall Street, all these things all were antithetical to Reaganism.
We're talking to Craig Shirley, the author of Last Act, which is a big bestseller, of course, about Reagan's final years. Craig, when we watch the conversation, listen to the conversation about foreign policy, and you see Obama and Hillary both coming out against Ted Cruz yesterday, his crazy idea of doing more to police problem neighborhoods, which, are Muslim neighborhoods, because of, obviously, the terrorist threat comes out of radicalization there for the most part. They both come out against Cruz. And, of course, all of these people have come out against Trump in different iterations.
Sure.
It seems to me that the Trumpians and the Cruziacs have to figure out a way to come together and say, for the betterment of the country, we're going to put aside our personal squabbles, and they've been pretty pitched. But we're going to do the best for this country, and we're going to show the country how we can forge a new way forward in governance that respects all people and allows the rule of law and demands that the rule of law be applied across the board, where our nation's protected, our jobs are more secure because we're going to do the right thing in trade and immigration and tax policy. And the establishment has failed. And we're so committed to defeating the forces of ignorance in politics that we're going to team up together. To me, that would just be a winning idea.
Look, the old phrase is politics is the art of the possible. Is everybody knows that John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson despised each other, but they still ran together and won because Kennedy ultimately needed Texas and needed Johnson's help. Is that Reagan and Bush, Eisenhower and Nixon is that anything is possible. So it very well may be that they get together. One thing's for sure though is that if they get in a dance contest with Obama, they're sure as hell going to win.
Well, I think that there are a lot of people in the establishment and the GOP who find both Cruz and Trump so icky and so distasteful that they would rather have Hillary. They would rather have Hillary be president and then run Jeb or Marco again in 4 years or someone like them and be able to say, see, it was their fault we lost.
Yeah, but culture trumps ideology. It always has, and they are of Hillary's culture. They're of Washington and New York elitist, access selling culture. They're not from, rural Virginia or rural Alabama or wherever else. They find, people like that, whether it was Ronald Reagan or Donald Trump or Ted Cruz, they find them tacky.
And I think, when you really listen closely to Ryan yesterday,
yeah.
That message was to, it was to all the elites and politics and
Absolutely.
the donor class. And that was, sure. I'm not one of them. I'm above the fray. I'm
right.
not down and dirty. Those are dirty people. I'm above the fray.
That was aimed right at the Washington liberal media establishment.
No, for sure. We just love having you on. Craig Shirley, of course, author of Last Act. And you've written so many wonderful things over the years and essays about politics and giving it a historical grounding, which is so needed today, with so many people claiming to represent Reagan's mantle, and they just bastardize it. I'm so tired of these people using Reagan's name in vain. And Craig is one of the – Craig and Newt together and Buchanan, Shirley, and Gingrich. Those three together and – Schlafly have done more to set the record straight about Reagan than pretty much anyone else I can think of out there. Thank you so much.